Emma had been a servant in the Marquis Miserian's household since the day the mistress was born. She even remembered the day she gently cradled baby Alice for the first time, while the little one slept peacefully. Emma thought of the child as an angel, enchanted by her boundless charm, snow-white skin, and rosy cheeks. Perhaps she believed that all children were so beautiful, but the moment her fingers brushed the infant's cheek, the child's emerald eyes opened wide, and she burst into a melodious laugh, weakly gripping Emma's finger in her tiny fist. Overwhelmed by her beauty and sweetness, Emma fell deeply in love with her mistress, earnestly wishing her a life of unbroken happiness, free from sorrow. With each passing year, month, even day, Alice grew more beautiful. Though everyone in the palace insisted that the maid Helena was the most stunning of all, Emma was certain such claims only came from those who had never laid eyes on her mistress. When the artist arrived to paint Lady Miserian's portrait, it was yet another chance to marvel at her extraordinary beauty. Her jet-black hair had grown to her waist, the strands framing a snow-white, solemn face with a sharp chin and slightly upturned nose. Her deep emerald eyes, reminiscent of a dense forest on a sweltering summer day, pierced through, studying one's soul, standing out as vividly as her lips, which could be compared to the delicate petals of a rose. The maid was certain that anyone who looked upon her mistress, as she did, would want to give their heart to Alice without hesitation. In Emma's eyes, she had always been an angel. As the only daughter of one of the most influential families in the empire, Lady Miserian received only the best. Perhaps it was because of these privileges and the bitter envy they inspired that she was neither liked nor regarded as someone who deserved, in their eyes, such an easy and blissful life. On one particular day, a maid was assisting her lady as she prepared for the ball at the imperial palace, but her ears caught a discussion about her mistress's family name, and she suddenly froze. 3 people were gossiping, saying that Lady Miserian had become conceited and was already acting like the crown prince's wife just because they were engaged. Alice overheard their spiteful whispers mixed with irritating laughter, while Emma watched her mistress with sadness, powerless to intervene. However, when her mistress ordered the maid to stay behind and strode toward the insolent group, Emma grew alarmed, reaching out her hand as if trying to prevent what was about to happen. Approaching the group, Alice immediately pointed out their shameless, ignoble behavior, which was unbefitting of noble families. With her head held high, Alice put the gossips in their place, reminding them that they were on the grounds of the sacred palace and had the audacity to slander the future crown princess, and by extension, the imperial court itself. Perhaps she should report this to His Majesty to safeguard the palace from slander and degradation. But the gossips began pleading with Lady Miserian for mercy and forgiveness. Emma had long understood that Alice would never mold herself into a girl who was agreeable to everyone, especially not to those who refused to acknowledge her. On the contrary, she often seemed like a living nightmare, the very embodiment of defiance. However, though Lady Miserian did not show it, such situations troubled her, stirred her, and likely even hurt her. How Emma wished that all of this would bypass her mistress, and that she could simply be happy. She deserved it, no matter what others said. That same day, after Alice had silenced the gossips, later in the evening, as Emma combed her mistress's thick hair, the maid suggested that she could have personally informed the Marquis about those heirs of the Count's families, so they would never dare to open their filthy mouths again. However, Lady Miserian firmly stated that Emma should not have been involved. This was a matter for her alone, her strength and authority, to prove that no one should disregard either her or her servants. When Emma asked in surprise why such efforts were necessary, given that they didn't even share noble blood, her mistress gave a faint smile and explained that people merely hid behind their hatred of her to insult her entire household and servants, assuming that everyone under one roof was the same. Alice could neither tolerate nor accept such behavior, and so she instructed Emma to also walk with her head held high and her shoulders squared. Once the Marquis's daughter became the Crown Prince's fiancée, she was subjected to rigorous lessons in palace etiquette and new responsibilities. At times, there wasn't even time to sleep, yet not a single palace visit was ever missed. After her returns, she often lacked the strength even to take a bath. Alice, utterly exhausted, would simply beg to be allowed to sleep. Even though there were countless rumors about the prince's hatred for his fiancée, she never displayed any emotion about it in front of Emma. Likewise, the maid, not wanting to accidentally wound her mistress's pride, neither offered comfort nor inquired about the truth of the rumors, even if she longed to support and console her. However, it seemed the loud rumors were true, for over time, her mistress's light gradually dimmed. One day, as Emma was shaking out the blankets, she happened to catch sight of her mistress, quite by chance, sitting on the ground in the shade, gazing at the river, and crying. No one had ever seen her tears before, not even when people tried to drive her to despair by hurling cruel insults. The maid was stunned, but she hurried to her mistress, spreading out the blanket and draping it over her shoulders, lamenting the cold wind. When Emma urged her to stand, Alice posed a sudden question. Why is love so important? Why is it easier for the one who loves and smiles at the prince to become empress? Isn't the throne something to be earned, not simply a reward for loving and belonging to the highest ranks of nobility? It seemed the crown prince was oblivious to Lady Miserian's efforts, and now she was convinced that the notion she had been taught, that the primary duty of an empress was to help and support the emperor, was a lie. All her efforts had been in vain. Even if the prince had no feelings for her, he could at least have acknowledged her efforts, but he didn't deign to do even that. All the attention went to the one who only knew how to smile and be kind. Emma's heart was breaking. She desperately wished she could be a witch, conjure rain, and hide her mistress's bitter tears. She embraced her tightly, fervently apologizing for her powerlessness to help fulfill her mistress's wish. In her mind, she prayed ceaselessly to God for mercy and for Miserian's dream to come true, while her mistress kept convincing herself that it would be perfectly fine if she disappeared from this world forever. That day, both of their wishes came true, though not in a way anyone could have foreseen. From that day, many of her habits changed. When anxious, her mistress no longer tapped her ring finger on the table, nor did she drink a glass of water in the morning or bite her nails. Even her manner of speaking underwent a transformation. She developed a taste for spicy food, and even began treating her servants with more courtesy and respect. Emma, who had lived side by side with Lady Miserian, couldn't help but notice the new speech patterns, gait, and habits, and she realized this was not the same girl she had cared for all her life. One question kept echoing in her mind. Who was she? If the maid dared to show even the slightest doubt about her mistress's identity, she would surely be deemed insane and cast out of the palace. So she didn't dare to ask Alice directly, but she couldn't stop asking herself. Once, Emma tried to catch the impostor off guard by asking if she remembered a moment from her childhood, when at 6 years old, she first rode a racehorse, fell, and the prince helped her up. But the stranger knew that this had actually happened when Alice was 15, and she corrected the maid, passing Emma's test to rule out memory loss. The key events were all intact, only minor habits had changed. Lady Miserian then asked her not to bring up such trivial matters again, to which Emma obediently nodded. Yet the strangest and most surprising thing occurred during her attempts to seem like her usual old self. One night, the maid sat at a small desk, leaning over a book with a pencil in hand, scribbling various theories about what could have happened to her Alice. Perhaps her body had been possessed by an evil witch. Maybe she should seek help, but the moment she imagined her beloved mistress's body tied to a stake and engulfed in flames, Emma immediately dismissed the idea in horror. Her thoughts on what she ought to do were interrupted by a faint rustling sound. A shadow flickered past the window, and in the moonlight, it became clear. It was Alice. But where could she be headed so late at night? The journey could be dangerous in the dark, especially considering the recent troubles with the attack and the fall from the window. Could those incidents have been more than mere accidents? As soon as this thought crossed Emma's mind, she sprang to her feet in an instant. Grabbing the nearby lamp with a burning candle and along the edge of the dark forest, she ran as fast as she could after her mistress. Emma searched for the girl with her eyes, heading in the direction she had gone. She called out for Lady Miserian, but only the echo responded. She couldn't afford to lose her. Suddenly, branches rustled to her right, and when she turned toward the sound, she saw a familiar silhouette in a white dress. Calling out to her mistress once more, Emma let the candlestick fall from her hands and rushed toward her, shielding her face from the sharp branches. Alice stood with her back to her, but who could predict what would happen in the next moment? Emma kept running until the distance between them was no more than 3 meters. She tried to question Alice about her sudden flight and persuade her to return. With a distressed voice, she received the answer that Alice wanted to go home. The maid grabbed her mistress by the shoulders, gently shaking her, and suggested they return to the estate together. But Alice suddenly started talking about her mother. Emma thought she was delirious and wanted to remind her of something, but Alice kept insisting that she wanted the very same fried rice with kimchi her mother always made for her. Emma suddenly took a few steps back from the crying girl. It was a turning point in realizing that the Alice standing before her was undeniably not the confident, self-assured, sincere, and kind Lady Miserian the maid had known. Not at all. She was a broken soul, thrashing in her nightmare, unable to escape and return to her true path. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, and her voice broke from pleading to be let go to her real home, a place Emma knew nothing about, as she had come to fully grasp the situation far too late. When poor Alice began to spiral into hysteria, the maid immediately tried to calm her panic, gripping her cold, trembling hands in her own palms, and swearing that she would do everything in her power to help her mistress. She sincerely and firmly assured Alice that everything would be all right and that things would get better again, devotedly declaring that she would stay by her side until the very end. Only one question lingered unspoken on Emma's lips. Just how terrible had it been? How deeply had she sunk into despair that absolutely nothing in this world could keep her here? From that day, the servants kept a constant watch over their mistress, worried about her mental state and refusal to eat. They were ready to feed her with a spoon, offering her all her favorite treats, just to get her to eat something. Alice gave in to this. With her desire to rest and do nothing, such an initiative worked in her favor. Of course, after what had happened, rumors about her began to spread through the palace, and it was inevitable that they would reach beyond the gates of the imperial palace to the wider society. That day, jewelry merchants arrived at the Miserian estate, lavishly praising their jewels, trying to capture the attention of the lady, convincing her that anyone who saw her wearing a necklace would forget how to speak from the shock. The girl herself was indifferent, only noting in her mind that the people would never forget how to gossip about the slap from the crown prince to his fiancée. The only thing that caught her attention was the conversation of the maids, standing a little farther away, discussing the events. They were surprised that their mistress hadn't done anything. She could have complained to His Majesty or gone to Helen and caused a scene, which would have been much more like her. Alice wondered why she had gone to Entablem when it would have made more sense to go to the prince and, as it should be, smack him over the head with a club. Even if the desire for revenge had been there, suddenly, an image of the Marquis appeared in her mind, the same one who had placed his hand on her shoulder the previous day, and in haste, she ended the transaction, deciding to take everything and sending the merchants to collect payment on the lower floor. With her servants in tow, she left the main hall, lost in her thoughts. Why, after dinner with the Marquis, had she been thinking more about her family? Perhaps even because of such a small detail like the identical size of their palms with her real father. The girl couldn't describe her relationship with her parents as either good or bad. It was just ordinary if you didn't take into account how tired she had become of her family home. The same cheap food, the same small store with the same cashier, the same reproaches from her parents about the lack of money, crushing all dreams and motivation, forcing her to rely only on herself. The pressure of being constantly asked about something and expected to do well, with no interest or support for her endeavors, studies or work, was suffocating and hurtful. When she returned home, the only questions she faced were whether she had arrived, whether she had eaten, and that was it, while her younger brother could ask for his favorite dish at any time, even though the ingredients weren't in the house, and her father always supported him, despite the financial strain, because he had an upcoming exam retake, which he was allowed to try, unlike his daughter. Such condescension toward her brother sparked a growing resentment toward her parents. Even when she moved out and they called, the conversations were mostly on holidays and birthdays, when the daughter would send them money. Though they offered her to visit, cook her favorite chicken stew, and her mother would say that her father missed her even if he didn't show it, the girl would brush it off with the excuse of too much work and studying. In truth, their expectation for her return didn't feel real at all. Her mother even seemed to have forgotten that she loved her daughter. When asked what she wanted for her birthday, the girl, without a second thought, quickly replied, "Nothing." This cold attitude towards them was driven by the understanding that she could meet with them whenever she wanted, as they were always waiting for her. Now memories surfaced of how her little brother was always sweet and helped around the house, which was in stark contrast to her sister. If only there had been a chance to meet them soon, the girl would have definitely tried to be a little warmer. The morning began with Emma speaking about the readiness of the attire for the knight's investiture, urging her lady to head to the palace as soon as possible. Her only concern was the color of the dress, while Alice recalled that in the novel this event was quite significant, and that it was unbecoming for the prince's fiancée to miss it, even if she didn't want to be there at all. Therefore, the girl hurriedly prepared and got into the carriage, realizing that the prince didn't feel the slightest regret for what he had done. He hadn't faced any consequences for the slap, so now she felt like a cow being taken to slaughter. The carriage moved, leaving the estate behind, and Lady Miserian gazed out the window, lost in thought. The beautiful blue sky with small clouds, more like feathers, the streets filled with happy, smiling people. And there was only Alice, sadly looking at the crowd, wondering why she had to endure it all. For what? What went wrong in her life that she had to force a smile for the fool who left a burning mark on her cheek? The firm command to stop the carriage came faster than she could weigh the decision. When the guards questioned what was wrong, Alice repeated the order louder and more forcefully, demanding the carriage to halt immediately. With a screech and an exclamation, the horse suddenly stopped, and Lady Miserian wasted no time, flinging open the door and running out, ignoring the guard accompanying her. She ran with all her might in uncomfortable high-heeled shoes, panicking, turning around to check if she had escaped the knights. A dark, empty alley appeared before her, into which Alice darted, hoping to hide there forever. She prayed that the world would abandon her for trying to escape her fated destiny, that it would return her to her home, so that it would finally give up and acknowledge that in this story, only Helena mattered. However, her fervent pleas were interrupted by a shout, signaling that they had found her, with an order to capture the lady. The girl refused to surrender and, quickly slipping off her uncomfortable shoes, ran barefoot, desperate not to be caught and taken back to the palace against her will. Narrow alleyways between tall buildings, casting shadows, hid the running girl who, in a panic, searched for a place to hide, until a sudden foreign hand reached out to her, grabbing the wrist of the frightened Alice. However, the person who caught her was a little girl with short hair, who pressed her finger to her lips, signaling that she wouldn't turn the stranger in. Suddenly, as if reading the girl's thoughts, she asked if she wanted to escape from her pursuers, to hide. There was no time to think, and the lady nodded, to which the little girl grinned mischievously. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips and whistled loudly, calling a swarm of children who filled the street, blocking the guard's way. Citing that her friends would buy time for the fugitive, she grabbed her hand and quickly led her away. They stopped in some house, hurriedly slamming the door shut, and the barefoot girl finally managed to catch her breath, along with her rescuer. The little girl extended her hand, but not for an introduction, for payment for her rescue and the call for help. Alice, realizing that she truly owed the girl a thank you, was about to search her pockets for coins, but of course there were none in her dress. When the girl realized there would be no money, she visibly drooped. And noticing this, the girl began to take off her earrings. Without hesitation or regret, she handed them to the little one as thanks, and the girl's eyes immediately lit up. The moment she took the jewel in her hands, there was a loud banging on the door. Alice was stunned at how quickly they had been found, but before she could even fully panic, her rescuer was already pushing her toward the wardrobe. Silent, she instructed her not to make a sound, then closed the wardrobe door, where Lady Miserian was already hiding. Judging by the way the girl spoke to the guest, he wasn't a knight, and the girl dared to peek through a crack. She guessed it was the girl's brother, and he didn't stand out in any way, just a typical background character. However, suddenly, it was as though he tensed up and asked who was there. The girl, completely unable to lie, stammered that she would never bring anyone into such a dusty house, to which the young man sighed in disappointment, and turning toward the wardrobe, he walked straight toward it. Alice covered her mouth with her hands, trying not to breathe or make a sound, silently praying he would pass by, and the girl sharply told her brother to stop. But the door was already opening, and a blond young man with brown eyes was looking at her, while the hidden Miserian trembled slightly, not understanding what would happen next. The young man calmly asked the guest to step out, to which Alice reluctantly stood up, leaving her failed hiding spot, and meeting the gaze of the one who had found her with determination. He turned a questioning look to his sister, who flinched and extended his hand, palm up, which the girl stared at as if she didn't understand what he wanted. But as soon as he made his expression slightly sterner, the little girl gave in, opening her fists, and she extended the contents of her palm to her brother. It turned out to be her earrings, which he returned despite the girl's objections, and Alice supported her side, confirming that they were payment for the rescue. The young man turned away, making it clear that he knew the jewels weren't stolen, but still stepped away from the bewildered lady. He approached his sister, ruffled her unruly hair, and reminded her that she shouldn't get involved with the nobility, even for special reasons, nor accept such expensive gifts from them. The girl once again looked at the jewelry in her palm, and suddenly threw it toward the young man, who by some miracle managed to catch the earrings right in front of his face. At the questioning look from Miserian, the girl sternly warned that if they didn't accept her payment, there would be far more trouble than it seemed right now. For the payment was not only for rescuing the nobility, but also for keeping quiet and not spreading rumors about what had happened among society.